Welcome to the human narratives. Welcome to the human narratives, everyone, to another beautiful Sunday evening. This is your host, Dorinda. It is a pleasure to be back. Tomorrow is Memorial Day, and we are thinking of those who did not make it home and just being able to honor you know, their lives and their contribution and all of their dedication. So today's topic basically kind of fall into actually grief, right? So I'm going to be talking a little bit about that, or a little bit more about that as well. But before I even dive into all of that, I had the wonderful opportunity this week to be able to just go and celebrate some of my old colleagues that I've had the opportunity to work with when I worked in the school systems or in the school system at the Mahaney Elementary. Miss Sykes and Miss Mason, both of them retired this past week. So, congratulations to those two educators who gave back to our children, our community, our generation. And all that you do means so much, and all you've done meant so much, and all you continue to do, I'm sure you're going to continue to make impact. But thank you for all you've done, and I'm so glad to just to be able to be a part of that celebration, right? To celebrate you guys, because I've seen that contribution. And another thing is, I had an opportunity to talk to one of, another teacher of mine, Miss Michelle, and her and I are going to link up and talk about her experience in the correction system. That's something I want you guys to just tune into. That's coming up pretty soon. She wants to be able to share some experience that she had also, went through as a result. And I think it's going to be something to, learn from, and hopefully something that we can grow as well, right? Why learn and not grow? There's no change in that, right? So, what is grief? Grief is so many different things, right? So many different emotions, deep emotions that comes when we experience a significant sense of loss, right? And it's not often due to losing someone that passes away, right? A loved one, or even, someone that, may not be a loved one, just someone, a friend, or just a connection. But it can also be relatable to losing something of importance, like relationships, a job, a health condition, or even a sense of identity, or in the future, right? Having that sense of loss about things that could happen in the future. So it's not just one feeling, it can come in a mixture of different emotions. I remembered, two losses I've experienced that really hit me hard. I remember when my brother passed in 2016, and actually, this, like I said, all of this kind of fitting in today's topic. We had just, returned back to school. It was the beginning of the year. The students were not back on campus, and we were doing some professional development trainings. And one of the activities was that as a staff, they asked you to write everything that you were feeling that felt heavy on a piece of paper. And the follow up instructions were, once you're all done, ball that paper up and stamp on that paper, as if you're letting go of all of that stressors or all of those emotions that you're feeling. And when I did that, I felt so light. I felt so good. And I was like tearing up, even though people didn't know I was tearing up. But I was tearing up in those moments to be able to understand that I didn't have to carry those emotions, right? Another moment was when my best friend passed away. And I remember I was, a night staff at the hospital as a therapist, a social worker, and her husband called me and said it was like around 3 in the morning, like, "Hey, Dorinda, we've lost Val." And I just burst into this hollering, like shout and scream. And I didn't care if I was at work or not, or even though I was the only one in the office at the moment. But it helped to be able to release that pain and that emotion of disbelief, of anger, of frustration, of so many things in once. So that's why I say it's a mixture of emotions, right? So, and one can grieve and cope in so many different ways, and of course we'll talk about that as well next, in later on. So when I said it comes with different emotions, it's not just about being sad, it's not just about being angry. It can comes with being confused, a sense of guilt, a sense of feeling numbed, and it can even affect our body system, right? It can affect our body system, our mind, and our spirit, and sometimes even causing some sense of exhaustion. And you may even have problem concentrating, withdrawal from other people, a lot of social events and social hobbies that one may enjoy doing. All of those things can be impacted, but there's not a linear grief is not linear, and we'll talk about all of that. you know so what are the stages of grief? There are 5 stages of grief. The first stage is denial. So what does denial looks like? Denial is basically saying that this can happen or this did not happen. It's basically saying or assuming in one when one is in that initial shock of the loss, and it gives our mind time to kind of process it, right? But we're not in that reality based mental space to understand that, or to want to understand that this is really happening or has happened. And when once it moves from that stages of denial, we can start experiencing some sense of anger. And what it looks like is, why is this happening? And when a lot of times when we don't understand the why as humans, what do? We search for answers. And when we don't find answers, or we can look within for those answers, we start looking at externally, right? And we start seeing, okay, who is to blame? So denial, as the denial stages fades off, the pain surfaces, and it may be redirected as anger towards, individual, family, friends, or even situations in general. But that's part of the natural process of grief. So anger is a natural outlet, and it's, even though it's an intense emotion, it is still normal emotion and a natural part of outlet in grieving, right? Once goes through that anger stages, then we go through the bargaining stage. And what this looks like is where we start bargaining for things. If we do this, maybe that will happen. It's just like if a child loses a parent, they may say, God, if you bring my parent back, I promise I'll bring all A's in school. I'll do well. All my chores will be completed. Those are example. And adults can also bargain in situations where losses may happen, right? So people often look back and wish that they had done something differently. So this stage may include wanting to make deals, either to try to undo what has already happened. And once the bargaining stages, then we go through depression stage, right? So the depression stage will look like, what's the point of going on? What's the point of even caring? What's the point of even wanting to be here? A lot of times people may have those thoughts as well, right? This deep sense of sadness that, the reality of the loss, that that's starting to fully sink in. And it can even involve, like I mentioned earlier, a withdrawing from other people, feeling very exhausted, just crying, just a sense of hopelessness, as well. And the last stages of denial, of grief, is acceptance, right? So the last stages of grief, like I spoke about, that there are 5 stages of grief. The last stages of grief is acceptance. And what does acceptance looks like is, it's going to be okay. It's finally getting in that space where you're saying that, acceptance doesn't really mean that you're saying that this is okay. that you're okay with the loss. It just means that you're coming into terms with it, right? You understand that even though this is still present, there are still things to be able to move forward so that you can live, and this person or this loss can still be part of your story. It doesn't have to be a separate, because a lot of times I think that's what happens with loss when we're grieving, is that because that person is no longer here, we're assuming that they no longer are part of our story or cannot be a part of our stories when we can. One of the technique that I often shared with families who are grieving is that if you hold on to that person in your heart, if you hold on to that person wishes and desire and the things that would smile, and that you also want to be able to hold on to those things as you are walking, as you are breathing, as you are living, that individuals, those things are also living and breathing through you. It's a choice to be able to understand that, right? So that's another way we can also cope when grieving with those or dealing with those intense emotions. Sometimes that may be difficult. It's understanding that physical separation is not, permanent separation. We can still have that relationship depending on how we choose to have that relationship with the loss that we've endured. So causes of grief, of course, can comes from, death, someone dying, a loss of a loved one, a loss of a pet, right? Miscarriage of a stillborn or stillbirth, breakup or divorce, and family estrangement, a loss of a trust or betrayal, health related issue. Years ago, a friend of mine went into a situation where they woke up one day and all of a sudden, a lot of their body was not operating in normalcy that they used to. It was a shock. It was a grieving years of having to endure those medical challenges, even though despite they were able to push through, you could still see the impact it had on that individual cognitive, cognition. So a lot of those things can happen, right? So it's not just about like someone dying, even losing your good health. If you're someone who prioritizes your good health, eat healthy, work out, and then all of a sudden you get a sudden diagnose unexpectedly, that can cause some sense of grief. A chronic pain that causes some sense of health deterioration. Life changes, loss of a job or career, right? Retirement, loss of a role, retirements in which that you have no control over, right? Not the one which you do. Loss of independence, situations, loss of home, loss of financial ruin, loss of, a dream goal, those things that maybe one may want to be able to achieve that maybe they never had the opportunity to. So a lot of times it can even be community loss, right? Displacement, war, genocide, or climate situation that can impact grief, or that can cause grief and impact one's emotions. So I talked a little bit about some of the symptoms that may come with grieving, right? So the deep sadness of sorrow, these are emotional symptoms. The shock or disbelief, especially early on in the stages. This may happen between the denial stages and the anger and the bargaining, and sometimes even in the acceptance stage, right? Um, and you have this guilt, this anxiety and loneliness that may even follow, feeling disconnected, feeling numbed, and just having a lot of different mood swings. Some of the physical symptoms, maybe fatigue, low energy, right? Tightness in one's chest, just upset stomach, somatic symptoms, a lot of somatic symptoms. If you're feeling that, nauseated, changes in one appetite, just sleep problems, hypo and hypermania, a lot of headaches and weakening of the immune system, a lot of those physical symptoms. Of course, if you're experiencing those things, seek medical support, right? Cognitive symptoms may, of course, be trouble concentrating, trouble, having remembering things, or being preoccupied with the loss and the memory of that individual or that thing, having intrusive thoughts and ruminating thoughts or flashbacks about the loss, and just being able to live, being in that unease unreality space, right? So those are some of the cognitive symptoms that one may experience. And the behavioral sometimes can also kind of match with the emotional part, the withdrawal from social activities, the crying frequently, the restlessness or pacing back and forth, which can impact the sleep, right? Knowing or staying busy, neglecting one's self care, not getting up. When those things kind of persist, of course, we do need to seek some kind of medical and mental health support as well, right? Spiritual symptoms, right? You got to take care of the soul too, as well, right? Questioning if one's belief is real. That may happen. Feeling abandoned, searching for meaning in life, searching for meaning in loss, feeling like maybe there's no meaning to life. All of those things can happen because grief comes very intense with very intense different emotions, right? But it can be manageable over time. Even with these symptoms persisting and becoming overwhelming, it's very important if we start feeling depression, start feeling persistent helplessness, or thoughts of even harming ourselves, that we understand that this is complicated grief or even clinical depression, and we need to be able to seek help, mental health professional support, to be able to take care of ourselves and live the life that we deserve, right? Because that's important. You're important. So, how long does it take to grieve? There's no set time on when or how long one can grieve. It all depends on how many different factors, right? We're all different, and all depends on the nature of the loss, the person emotional makeup, the person's support system, the resources that they have around them, their past experiences maybe around this type of loss. So grief is not something you get over. It is something that you have to learn how to live with, right? And you don't have to forget the beautiful memories of that beautiful thing maybe that was once lost, or even if it's a negative thing, we can learn how to help in a healthy way move from that space or those ruminating negative thoughts to get into a healthy, more positive thinking. So, the factors, of course, that can impact how long one grieve, like I mentioned earlier, when my brother passed, writing was pertinent and helped a lot for me. When my best friend passed, hollering and screaming was helpful for me, and crying, of course, right? So all of those things, and of course talking too, just being able to talk about her, just being able to talk to him in healthy places, right? In places in which I knew that they will be seen and loved in the way I knew that they loved and lived life, right? So a lot of all of those things helped. So factors that can help us move, are so that we're not lingering in these different emotions, is the type of loss, right? If it's a sudden loss, if it's a child loss, if it's suicidal, homicidal, all of those things can impact how long we grieve or how long it lasts. The closeness of the relationship, the support system, resources that we have around us, the previous mental health conditions, if there's any, also cultural or even spiritual beliefs can also impact that, right? There are cultures that may have certain things that they may do to continue to honor that person life, the ability to express and even process your emotion in healthy places. The bottom line is there's no normal time frame. Grief is not linear, and you don't move on. We move forward with the loss, knowing that we need to be able to understand and move, understand that life is worth living. Of course, and it comes with the different, ways of learning how to be able to get back in that space, right? And it doesn't have to be rushed. How do we cope with grief? We can cope with grief by crying, by hollering, by sitting in silence. Whatever your body needs is what we have to be able to support it in the healthy way, right? Because we can also be very destructive as humans And those coping strategies can be unhealthy coping strategies, but we want to make sure that we're utilizing healthy coping strategies to be able to support our body, our mind, and our soul and spirit and so forth. So journaling, right? Writing your thoughts and emotions and feeling, writing letter to the personal thing that you lost, about what you didn't get to say, maybe when you didn't have the opportunity to talk to someone that you trust, right? A trusted friend or family. Join a support group, either in person or online. Talk to a grief counselor or therapist, especially to be able to deal with those feeling of being overwhelmed or even feeling stuck, right? Create rituals. A lot of times I hear people who are grieving says that I'm sitting and waiting for anniversaries, and when anniversaries come, it hit me hard. Don't sit around waiting for those emotions to hit you hard. Find things that make you feel comfortable, that makes you feel relaxed, that make you remember these persons and celebrate their life in an honorable way that they will also love, right? So plan for it. What are the things that you can do to engage? Get out of the house. Maybe if you're sitting around a lot, read a book. Do something that will uplift your spirit during that time. Practice spiritual or religious ritual that bring you some sense of comfort. Reading the Bible, reading the Quran. Uh, Fasting, doing things that will bring you some kind of nourishment within, right? Care for your body. Grief lives in the body. So try to eat healthy, try to sleep and move even when you don't feel like it. Be gentle with yourself, take deep breathing, do some meditation, and do some grounding activities that's going to help you support, right? Support who you are in the space that you are in. And just being able to give yourself the grace, right? Educate yourself, read books about grief. The Year of Magical Thinking by Joanne Didion, right? It's okay that you're not okay by Megan Devine, right? Knowing others that have walked through this path or can also help us normalize that what we're feeling is normal and it's okay, and that we also can heal. But we have to give ourselves time, and we have to give ourselves the grace, and we cannot rush or compare the process to anybody or anything else, right? We have to set tiny goals along the way, finding meanings, right? Finding meanings that so we don't feel stuck, finding meanings so that we're able to function on a day to day, finding meanings so that our thoughts, we don't have those thoughts of self harm or helplessness. And if we are having those thoughts of self harm and helplessness, we are actually seeking support, right? Seeking mental health or psychiatric support. Um, I wanted to talk about the last thing, which is the three C's of grief. Well, let's talk first like, when to seek help, right? So I talked a little bit about seeking psychiatric help when you start feeling the symptoms persistent for over a year, or if you feel like this is not your normal self. Friends and family are also concerned, right? So if you're stuck in your grief and after a year or more, if you're unable to function in your day-to-day life, and such as work, you can't get up to go to work, you're not able to get up to get the children ready for school, the things that maybe you used to enjoy doing, maybe going to eat or get your hair done, those are things that you're starting to find very taskful. Even getting out the bed or maybe taking shower, right, or brushing your teeth, or combing your hair, a lot of those things starting to become very overwhelming and stressful. Having thoughts of self harm or helplessness, experiencing any type of panic attacks, or even prolonged depression or intense guilt, we do want to seek help and consider professional help in those situations. If you're grieving, it is okay to get support. You are not alone, and it's important not to isolate ourselves as well. So the three C's of grief basically is kind of like a supportive framework that help people kind of cope with loss as well. And it stands for the first is choose, right? Take control where you can. Because grief can also seem chaotic at times, right? Where we feel very powerless. So we have to choose and remind ourselves that we still have the ability to show and exercise our power, even in these moments where we feel like we don't have the energy or power to feel that way, right? So today I choose to rest, or today I choose to talk to someone instead of isolating, right? Those are all examples. So choosing how you intend to spend your time, whom you talk to, what to hold on to, and what to let go. That's really important. Part of the healing and grieving process. The second C is connect. This is where we are able to reach out. We're not grieving alone, right? Even though sometimes we may need that isolation time, it is also very pertinent for us to not stay isolated. So we can connect, talk to friends, join support groups. We can even have our pets. You can talk to your medical professional or your therapist to get your emotional support animals. So you can hug your pet, you can have a pet. You can just simply remember that you're not the only one in this place, and that isolating yourself can only lead to suffering and even dwelling in those thoughts and in those painful memories, right? Or in those painful thinking. So creating a space to be able to heal is going to be important. And the last C is to be able to communicate, express what you're feeling, needing, or thinking, right? So this could mean talking openly about your grief, asking for help, or even just naming your emotions, and how you're feeling. But get the support that you need, because grief can be heavy if we bottle it all in, right? I talked about the experience at the school where I was able to write all of the emotions that I was feeling carrying the passing of my brother, and how that helped to be able to just let go, to understand that, yes, I'm grieving him, but I didn't have to carry all of that stuff to keep going, right? Because I still needed my energy to live and so forth. And sometimes it's really hard to distinguish that when you're in that space. But it still can be done. So these are just examples to be able to be gentle with yourself in this path, to understand that even though everything feels uncertain, that we are able to still be able to choose, connect, and communicate those things that we're feeling, so that we don't feel alone. So we don't feel alone. Not alone. You know. Yeah. So grief affects our body and our mind in so many different ways. I've talked about the cognitive, um, you know, difficulties or challenges, even the physical challenges that may also arise from those different things. But it's really important that we support our body and our brain, like gentle exercises, like walking, staying hydrated, sleeping, eating good, nourishing food, right? Creating a calming routine, grounding techniques to help us stay grounded, deep breathing, mindfulness, and just being able to let yourself rest, right? Because your body is going through a lot in those moments, and it's really important to create the space that it need, as well. So, because it stores in different part of your body. It stores in your chest, your heart, your throat, your stomach, your gut, your neck, your shoulder, your back, your spine, your limbs, fatigue. It stores in so many important organs that we need to be able to move around. And when we're feeling down, it doesn't always help, right? So, it activates the nervous system, especially in the somatic, the fight or flight, right? And then the parasympathetic, where is the freeze or collapse response. So if you don't have a safe outlet for your emotions, or for our emotions, then our bodies store all of these tension and pain or fatigue, right? So it's really important that we have outlets so that our body is not storing these unhealthy emotions, and we are also not dumping it in unhealthy ways or unhealthy places. So we have to be able to support our body, we have to be able to support our brain, and we can support those things to through a lot of mindfulness activities, but also self-awareness. So as we approach Memorial Day and so many other different things that sometimes life bring and the losses that we experience, I want you to understand that the emotions and feelings that you are experiencing are normal, and give yourself the space and grace that you need and deserve to heal as long as you need, and the support that you need in that space, because you deserve it. You deserve it, right? So much love and respect always. This is your girl and your host, the one and only Dorinda. Until I see you again.